Welcome to Ridgecrest Talk. Your host Paul Vanderwerf talking with the Tomato Man from here in the Valley, Scott Shacklett. And Scott, we're kind of having the Monday Night Football version of gardening. And welcome, thank you for coming. Why don't you introduce yourself to the viewing audience and tell a little bit about growing up here in the Valley.
Well, hello, my name's Scott Shacklett. I was born here in 1949, born in Trona actually, when there was nothing but gravel road over there. And my dad moved here in 46, and I was raised here until high school, left for a few years to go to college, came back upon graduating from college, and got in the nursery business. I owned Means Nursery for quite a while. I was a landscape contractor, and ultimately that evolved into being a small farmer.
Yeah, we actually had, about a month ago, we had a young Girl Scout on the show that had put together a community garden at the Presbyterian Church. And the horticulturist that was assisting her, Mark Morley, had said, I think just before you started Means Nursery, he had worked a summer job in the early 70s, around 74, at Means Nursery. And that's a name that a lot of us have forgotten over the years, but that was that little trail that went to the park, went right next to the nursery.
Right by that.
And I remember going through there in the 70s when you were there. And
Yeah,
that's a few years back.
I went through that when the Means were still there, and there was a big parakeet aviary out there, and when you went by, there was this roar of parakeets chirping. I found out later that she sold parakeets all over the country. She had thousands of them.
Right, there's all these little jewels like that, and there's actually an elderly lady up there in Kern Valley with an iris garden that had 2,400 different varieties I got to visit, and she's winding down. I think she's down to maybe 800 varieties as she gets rid of those. And people live in the area and they never know about these jewels. And really what we're mainly talking about is what you're doing now is you're probably the only local grower that we have for gardening. We used to have the farmers market at the front gate, but why don't you tell us where are you growing now, and how do we find you nowadays?
Well, we ended up moving out to Ridgecrest. We kind of got run out of town, to tell you the truth. You know, the water rates went up so high, and then the city was not very cooperative when it came to expanding. And so we ended up relocating out to Ridgecrest. We're now at 559 Oriole Street, which is about a mile south of downtown. And we have part of our greenhouse out there, and we're in the process of getting permits from the county to finish rebuilding our greenhouse, the one that was in Ridgecrest out there. And in addition to that, we also have about a half an acre of product outside the greenhouse that we grow in the summertime.
So really you're closer to Ridgecrest now than you are to Ridgecrest, right?
Oh yeah, we consider ourselves to be Ridgecrest. We're only, like I say, only a mile south of town.
Yeah, I remember driving through there and seeing those empty greenhouses for a while and kind of peeking in. You still had some tomatoes growing up pretty tall in there. And since then, I kept calling until I get a hold of you, and I got a chance to go out and look at your greenhouse out there where you are now. You're not just growing tomatoes, though, right? You're growing some other things now?
Well, in the greenhouse, we grow primarily tomatoes, but our small greenhouse, we grow English cucumbers. They're going to go in the ground probably this week or very early next week. And we also have some spinach that I'm trying this year. We have about 400 spinach plants that I just rotate through. As fast as I pull one out, I put another one in. And just kind of juice up the soil a little bit each time I plant, because I'm a big spinach fan, and I just want to see if there's a market for them here. And so far, they've sold fairly well.
Right. That's what my dad gets on me about. He says, grow something I like. So I finally put some strawberries in the ground, and we'll just have to wait around until those start coming up. And I think that is an important part for anybody who's out gardening is grow things that you like. And you're talking about the cucumber. I was talking to Jake Rudnick out at his property there in, near Onyx, and he was talking about gherkins, and he had some gherkins on his property. I'd never heard of those. Those are actually considered like a pickle?
Yeah.
And so I guess you get an opportunity to try these different crops. Do you end up trying different ones and then finding ones that grow well and kind of stick with those, or how do you do that?
Yeah, I'm constantly experimenting, but once I find a good one, I do stick with it. We had a tomato that we grew, 2 tomatoes actually, that came from De Ruyter seed over in Holland, and one was called Blitz and the other one was called Chirisita. And they were the best I had ever seen of their particular type. They had the best of all the worlds. The Blitz was a beautiful tomato, had a kind of a glossy skin, it had a real dark red flesh. It was very sweet and had great flavor, had excellent shelf life. Everything about it was really good. Chericita was, these are not my words, these are my customers. They said it was the best cherry tomato in the world. And I sold those things as fast as I could grow them. And as what happens sometimes in the business world, De Ruyter sold their company to Monsanto. And the first thing that Monsanto did once they bought De Ruyter seed was discontinue Blitz and Chericita. And so there I was out there with no tomato seeds anymore. So I had to grow. I knew I had one more year of Blitz, so I put a whole bed of 7 different varieties of tomatoes in the last crop with the Blitz. And out of that 7, we chose one called Heritage, which we're now growing. It was the best of the 7. It was very productive. It had a nice look to it. It didn't quite have the shelf life that Blitz had, or the flavor, but very close, and close enough. It met my standards, and so that's what we're growing now. But I still, this summer I had 3 new varieties in the little greenhouse for the summer crop, and just to see how they went. And of the 3, all of them were good. And I'm interested in all 3 of them to try again later, but I won't be doing that in the wintertime probably, just primarily in the summer.
Right, and just for the audience, the casual viewer, these varieties in tomatoes just have a rich history, and the real difference, like you said, is the person who tastes that tomato. It's nothing like the store-bought tomato. These are much more flavorful, much fresher. And one of the stories we had down at the UCLA Extension in the gardening class I took was the mortgage lifter tomato. And the way the story went was the guy had a gas station, and he was selling these tomatoes on the side, and they became so popular that they paid off his mortgage on his gas station. And so you don't think of a tomato being that good, but obviously you don't get the moniker the tomato man for selling tomatoes without good flavor.
No, I tell my customers when I'm out at farmers market, somebody new comes up and they go, "Is this any good?" And I go, "Well, let me just show you a couple of things here. You see this 100 boxes that are empty back here? Yes, well, they're not empty for no reason." And I said, I can't possibly make a living without repeat business. In other words, I can't spend 5 minutes trying to talk people into buying my tomatoes every week. I just don't have time to do that. So the only way I can succeed is with repeat business. And the only way you get repeat business is if you have a really high quality product.
All right, well, speaking of repeat business, we're going to take a break here for commercials to get the business for KZGN on one of our commercials.
Amen.
But this is Ridgecrest Talk. Paul Vanderwerp will be back right after this. And welcome back to Ridgecrest Talk. I'm kind of celebrating Monday Night Football theme tonight with the Joe Namath football jersey. I've had this in the closet for a few years, and I had to find the right time. December 15th, 2007 was when Joe Namath graduated from Alabama at the age of 64. He left college early after that great year, and actually it was 1964, 50 years ago now, that he had that great college year under Bear Bryant. And when we're talking about gardening and farming in the desert, one of the big concerns is water, and I wanted to come back to that. You talked about that briefly, the water costs in the water district, and looking at the water district reports, they don't list farming as a rate or as even having any farmers on their system, period.
Yeah, well, that's true, and as a result of that, they basically ran me out of town. I mean, I had a water bill that was so horrific that, I mean, I was getting ready to leave anyway, but I couldn't get out fast enough. The sad thing about that is that what I do, when expressed as in terms of pounds per gallon, is the most efficient farming in the world. There is nothing more efficient when you express it that way. Our water usage is really, really low compared to the number of pounds of tomatoes we get out of a greenhouse.
Right.
And so it's, to me, that's the kind of thing you want to have in a valley. Assuming you're going to grow at least some of your own food, you want to have something like that when water is potentially an issue.
I remember back in the 70s and 80s, everybody was really concerned and how these bigger box stores are going to come into the community, what impact that would have. And everything was buy local. And I think the economic model was that a local dollar spent by a local business that's manufacturing and producing a product is going to recirculate in the community 7 times. And that 7-time generation really multiplies through in the economy. Nowadays, sometimes it seems like we're looking at the economy when we just go to Walmart because we're getting tax revenue here in town rather than the taxes going out of town. But you're one of those few things that we can think of that we're actually producing locally that's
Right.
keeping that money locally, and I hate to see that go. But you're also talking about the water use that you're doing efficiently, and you use like a drip tape, right? Is
Right.
that what you're still using?
We use a product called drip tape. It has emitters that let water out of the tape about every 4 inches. And the reason I have the emitters so close together is because our soil is very sandy and it doesn't hold water very well. We do things to it to make it hold water better, but when I water, I want to make sure that the entire bed is covered, that there isn't any dry spots anywhere in there. I want my tomato vines to be able to access water and, by extension, fertilizer wherever they want to go. The more roots that I can generate, the more tomatoes I'm going to get. And that's critically important because the maintenance of a greenhouse is so expensive that you have to have high productivity in order to make it profitable.
Right, and the only other operation in the area that I've seen with the drip tape was actually that iris garden there in South Lake. As you're just coming up to the lake there, Lake Isabella. She has drip tape, and after walking through both properties, I can see how efficient those operations would be compared to flooding or some of the other watering techniques that are out there.
Well, my drip tape emits 1 gallon of water a minute for every 100 feet of tape. And usually I leave this time of year when it's cool and kind of overcast, I leave my drip system, or I only turn it on for about 15 minutes about every 3rd day. And now when it gets a little warmer, I'll water every day for about 15 minutes. But still, even when it's warm and I'm watering what I consider to be a lot, it's a tiny fraction of what my counterparts that grow outside would have to water.
Right, so somebody has their tomatoes just outside here in the desert. Actually, I grew some tomatoes this last year, and it was kind of funny because I put some basil as a companion plant, and as soon as June hit, I just wasn't going to water my tomatoes that much. They all died, and then my basil was able to rough out those hot summer months, and I had these beautiful, looked like tumbleweeds. My basil got so large that originally were just these long, leggy plants I just kind of stuck in the ground. But one of the things I'd visited your property, it must have been maybe almost 2 years now, is you were experimenting with some different fruit trees on the leeward or on the east side of your greenhouse.
Right.
Is there any update on that? Are you still waiting for that to
No,
get ripe? Or?
We planted 22 fruit trees over a 2-year period. The last ones went in about a year ago. And we have had just phenomenal results. We're using the same drip tape, except we're using it outside. We're watering, we've planted in beds the same as our tomato beds, and we're watering essentially the same way. And the trees have just grown in leaps and bounds. It's really, really impressive to see how well they've grown. And we're not really giving them that much water, but we're giving them enough water. And when I had the nursery business, I sold fruit trees by the hundreds. And some people succeeded with them, some didn't. But I always tried to impress on people that fruit trees are not water thrifty. They do need their water. That you don't want to overwater them, but you certainly don't want to starve them either. And one of the first things that happens to fruit trees when they're starved for water is they get the flat-headed borer, and the borer goes in and just destroys the tree. The tree's natural defense to the borers is an actively circulating sap. It's not going to ever have that if it has insufficient water. So that's one of the things we're doing with fruit trees out there. We're trying to demonstrate to people that you can successfully grow fruit trees here, but there are certain rules that have to be followed. And that's one of the things we're doing. And so far, it's just been phenomenal. Now, we haven't gotten any fruit yet because the trees are still too young. I got a few peaches last year and just a handful of pluots that I had planted 2 years ago. I got last year. But this coming year, I expect to get quite a number of peaches and pluots and maybe even a few cherries this year.
So really, in the next couple of years, we're really going to see that.
Yeah, I figure about 2 more years, we'll start to see what the trees are capable of doing. And we were growing onions in every other bed next to the fruit trees. We've stopped doing that because the trees have grown so much now, they're starting to shade the onions. So what we did was we took the onions, we're going to plant them in another place now, and we're going to put strawberries in with the fruit trees because they can tolerate a little bit of shade. In fact, probably even appreciate it a little bit.
Right. Now, one of the things I hate when I get somebody who really knows what they're talking about is you say important things, but you say it so quickly and smoothly that for a lot of us, we miss it.
Yeah.
And one of the things you were talking about is how a healthy tree, a healthy fruit tree, is going to naturally fight off the beetle or the bug or whatever's going to infest it. The only ones that are going to be able to infest your crop is when you're somehow weakening your crop.
Right.
And I think that's an important point. And so by, say when we go through a drought and we're not watering enough, we're actually setting those trees or those plants up because
Absolutely.
they're waiting now for a certain bug or a certain fungus or something to come along and cause a problem.
Plants, it's just plants in general, but garden crops too.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut you off right there. We're going to go right back. Right after this commercial, Ridgecrest Talk. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Ridgecrest Talk. And I actually have a watermelon here that I just pulled out of the garden. Imagine growing watermelons in December. That's how warm it's been this year. I was trying to grow this one into a football shape, see if I could throw that around the garden, but I'm pretty sure my kids would drop it and we wouldn't have anything left. But you know, we were talking about that on break, is that the different types of vegetables, like I've heard this, that you can actually put a watermelon in a cube and it will grow into that shape. It's
Right.
kind of interesting. But let's get back to what we're talking about, Scott. You were talking about plants, and we were talking about how if they don't have enough water or other problems. Why don't you explain more what you're talking about?
When a plant is under stress, it actually signals to the insects and the diseases and all that sort of thing that, hey, I'm on my way out, come and finish me off. That's nature's way of recycling. You know, when a plant's due to die, then we want things to come in and chew it up, get it back in the soil, the bacteria to consume it, and to just recycle it back into the universe, so to speak. When a plant that's otherwise healthy suddenly becomes unhealthy, it thinks it's dying, and it signals to those plants to all these things to come and finish me off and recycle me. So the greatest favor you can do a plant that you want to keep is make sure that it's really, really happy. Make sure it's well fed, well watered, that it has enough light, air circulation, whatever it may take. And it will repel the bugs and all that on its own. You don't really have to use pesticides. We do that all the time. We use very little. I use some predatory insects is all I use for controlling things in the greenhouse. And I've been doing 21 years now. I've never had to use synthetic pesticides ever.
And you even hear about some of those crazy stories, even playing classical music.
Yeah.
And I was singing of some of my plants, and that must have been what it was. They must have thought as soon as they heard me singing, it was time to give up.
Time to recycle.
And actually, somebody told me that you had some singing in your background.
Yeah, I sang in the choir in high school. I sang in the choir in college. We actually went on tour when I was in college and came to Ridgecrest, and we sang in Ridgecrest and in Trona because the choir director's sister lived in Trona. Her husband worked there or something. And so I actually sang here as a collegian a couple of times, which was kind of fun.
All right, and that's actually a lot of fun of being in a small town is having multiple hats that you wear.
Yeah.
But we're going to wrap this up. Let's talk about, you know, how people can see you and what's happening right now as far as what days you can come there or where you're going to be.
You can always find me at the greenhouse every Friday, no matter what, because that's my harvesting day.
What are the hours on Friday, like 8 to 12?
8 to 12, yeah, that's when we invite people to come out there. In the summertime, I have a booth that I set up on the main intersection of Inyakern on Friday, and then we set up at Cordell Construction on Saturday and Sunday sometimes if I have enough stuff.
So Cordell Electric's right on China Lake Boulevard.
Yeah, it's where the old A&W used to be, right across from the mall there, or the pink mall where Stater Brothers is, right next door to Home Depot.
Right, so it's basically right in front of the Sierra Sands School District offices.
Yeah.
All right, and
So
you're there on Saturdays.
On Saturdays, and when I have enough stuff, I'm there on Sunday too. It just depends on the quantity. And we did that for the first time this year as an effort to try to see if we can maybe reinstate the farmers market. I started that farmers market along with some ladies in the garden club about 20 years ago, and we put it in the hands of somebody else who ran it after we got it started. And he later got in trouble with the state over some kind of license they wanted him to have, and it ended up shutting down the whole market. And so now we're talking about maybe starting it up again, only this time controlling it locally.
Well, I think that's the real key, and we're going to have some other talks coming up next couple of weeks. I'm hopefully going to have Jake Rudnick come in from the Onyx Farmers Market next week, and we also have some folks up in the Owens Valley that are getting more into farmers markets, so hopefully we'll have them to talk to also.
Right.
And I think that's real exciting, and you see a lot of people talking, whether it's just getting a box of produce once a week or being able to come out to the farmers market, especially if you're moving here from another area. You're not used to not having some type of local presence that you can go out and buy that. But you are available on Saturdays, sometimes Saturdays and Sundays?
Yeah, in the summer, Saturday and Sunday. Now, when I get into my winter season, which is my main season, I have to go out of town on the weekends myself personally, because I have to go to farmers markets because we grow so much produce we can't possibly sell it all here. So I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen through the winter. We're going to maybe work something out with Jake, or we're going to see what happens, because unless we get enough people to come out and buy tomatoes, I can't really afford to hire somebody to sit there and sell, 20 pounds of tomatoes. So we're just going to have to let that evolve and see what happens. But once we get the outside stuff from the summer, where we have a large variety, then we'll for sure be open at that time. So.
Now, when I first started gardening, and I've only been growing for a few years, in March and April, when you're thinking everything's supposed to grow, everything gets blown away by the wind.
Right.
And so I started to learn that fall was a great time to grow.
Sure.
But now as I'm growing more, as long as things don't freeze on me, I'm starting to think that maybe winter is the best time to grow. Is that what you're saying too? Is winter is the best time?
Well, no, not really, because you can't grow outside in the winter. I have a greenhouse, so I can grow in the winter. And that's my main season. That's,
okay. You're able to take advantage of that greenhouse.
Right. That's the reason I built the greenhouse, is so that I could produce a tomato in the winter when nobody else has tomatoes. That way I can get enough money for it to justify having the greenhouse, because that's a very expensive proposition.
Right.
So yeah, the winter time, no, that's a time to do your soil preparation. That's a time to get all your ducks in a row and get everything ready to go. You can plant some things like onions, garlic, that sort of thing in the fall and winter. You can maybe, if it's not too cold, you can maybe get some wintertime things to grow, like the cabbage family and all that. Right now I've got some broccoli and some Swiss chard out there that's doing great, and it'll continue to do great unless we get a real hard freeze. So there are some things you can do in the winter, but mainly it's getting everything ready to go. Get your scheduling down, make sure all your soil prep's done. Just get everything ready that you can possibly get ready, and then order your seeds. Plan your garden, whatever, and then when the time is right, you're ready to go, and boom, you're off to the races.
So it's housekeeping time right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, as far as the internet, if people are trying to get a hold of you to check your times or anything like that, are you out there on the internet at all?
The best thing to do is to like me on Facebook as Tomato Man. Just get on Facebook and like me. And everything that I do on Facebook. I don't even have a website anymore. I used to have both. But I found that my site on Facebook serves me the best. I can download pictures onto it. I have photographs on there almost every week. There's a whole lot of photographs on there where you can see how I do what I do. You can literally watch a tomato plant grow from the time it goes in the ground until I start to harvest it. There's all kinds of cool stuff on there. And then I have a posting that I put at least once a week. I try not to put on too much stuff because I don't want people to
right.
run me out, but we try to put something in Thursday and Friday.
All right, well, we're out of time, Scott. Really appreciate it. For those of you at home, you get on Facebook, like Scott said. If you're not getting on the computer, you need to get one of these handheld devices. That's a phone, and also you can check right on there. And Scott, I just really appreciate you coming out and talking with everybody, and keep up the hard work in the tomato business.
Thank you, Paul. Pleasure being here.